My name is Margaret Stevens, and I'm 63 years old. I was called unoccupied, worthless, a woman with no purpose. Then my son-in-law abandoned 5 children on my doorstep and disappeared for a year. What happened next would change all our lives forever. But before I tell you this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. For over 30 years, I stood before classrooms full of restless children, teaching them to read, to dream, to believe in themselves. Now, in my retirement, I found a different kind of purpose in the quiet rhythms of my small Texas town, tending my garden, baking for church socials, watching the sun paint the sky orange each evening. That Sunday started like any other. The scent of cinnamon and brown sugar filled my kitchen as I pressed lattice strips across an apple pie, my hands working from muscle memory. I was expecting Emily and her family for dinner later that week, not today. So when I heard car doors slam in my driveway, I nearly dropped my rolling pin through the lace curtains. I watched them pile out. My daughter Emily, her husband Robert, and all 5 of my grandchildren, Liam, the eldest at 12, helped little Ethan out of his booster seat. Sophie and Grace tumbled onto the grass, their sundresses catching the breeze. Noah, quiet as always, clutched a sketchbook to his chest. Something felt wrong. I wiped flour from my hands and opened the door, painting on my warmest smile. "What a wonderful surprise!" Emily's embrace felt desperate, her fingers clutching my shoulders a moment too long. When she pulled back, I saw the shadows under her eyes, the tightness around her mouth. Robert stood behind her, jaw clenched, arms crossed over his chest like a barrier. "Hope you don't mind us dropping by, Margaret," he said, though his tone suggested he didn't much care if I did. "Of course not. I've just put a pie in the oven. You're all staying for lunch, I hope." The children scattered through my house like dandelion seeds, their laughter filling rooms that had been silent too long. I set about preparing lunch, sandwiches, lemonade, the cucumber salad Emily loved as a child. But my daughter barely touched her plate. She sat picking at the crust of her bread, stealing glances at Robert, who ate in stony silence. "Everything all right, sweetheart?" I asked, reaching for her hand. "Fine, Mama, just tired." But mothers know. We know the weight of unspoken words, the tremor in forced smiles. I watched Robert push his plate away and stand abruptly, the chair legs scraping against my worn linoleum. "Margaret," he said, his voice flat, "we need to talk." My heart stuttered. Those 4 words rarely preceded good news. "Of course. Let me just—" Now, outside, Emily's eyes met mine for just a second, pleading, ashamed. Before she looked away, I followed Robert through the back door, into the yard where my roses bloomed, oblivious to the storm gathering in the Texas heat. He didn't wait for me to settle. "You live like someone without a care in the world," he began, and I felt the first crack appear in my carefully maintained composure. "No job, no bills, no real responsibilities, just puttering around with your flowers, while the rest of us deal with the reality." The words struck like physical blows. I opened my mouth to respond, but he wasn't finished. "We need you to watch the kids for a while. Emily and I have some things to handle, important things. And since you've got nothing but time on your hands, how long?" My voice came out smaller than I'd intended. He shrugged. "I'll call you." That was all. No please, no thank you, no acknowledgement that he was asking me to uproot my entire life. Just an assumption that because I was retired, because I was alone, because I was old, I was available, expendable, and ultimately worthless. The next morning, they arrived with 5 suitcases and hollow promises, and then they were gone, their car disappearing down the dusty road, leaving me standing in my doorway with 5 confused children and a heart full of questions I couldn't answer. The backyard felt smaller than usual, the air thick with something I couldn't name. Robert stood with his back to my roses, arms crossed, his shadow falling across the petunias I'd planted in spring. I clasped my hands together to stop them from shaking. "Margaret," he said, and the way he spat my name, not Mom, not even Mrs. Stevens, told me everything I needed to know about what was coming. "You live like someone who's checked out of life. No job, no responsibilities, no real concerns, just this." He gestured dismissively at my garden. At the home I'd spent decades making beautiful, playing in the dirt while the rest of us are out there fighting. Each word was a carefully placed stone on my chest. I wanted to tell him about the 33 years I'd spent molding young minds, about the scholarship fund I'd started in my late husband's name, about the quilts I made for every new baby in our church. But my throat had closed around the words. "Since you have so much free time," he continued, his voice dripping with contempt, "you can watch the kids for a while. Emily and I need to take care of some business. Important business. Adult business. Robert, how long are we talking about?" He shrugged, checking his phone. "I'll let you know. But the children have school and their routines and figure it out. That's what you've got all this free time for, right?" I looked past him to the kitchen window, where I could see Emily helping Sophie pour lemonade, her movements mechanical, defeated, my daughter, who used to bring me dandelions like they were diamonds, who'd cried in my arms after her first heartbreak, who I'd watched walk down the aisle toward this man, while some tiny voice in my head whispered, "Are you sure?" That night I barely slept. I kept rehearsing conversations in my mind, ways to reach Emily, to understand what was happening. But when morning came, they arrived before I'd finished my coffee. Robert's truck rumbling into my driveway at 7:30, 5 small suitcases stacked in the bed. The children tumbled out, confusion written across their faces. Ethan clutched his stuffed elephant, his bottom lip already trembling. Sophie kept asking if they were going on vacation. Only Liam seemed to understand, his 12-year-old face carefully blank, his jaw set in a way that reminded me painfully of his grandfather. "Be good for Grandma," Emily said, her voice cracking. She kissed each of their heads, holding Ethan a moment too long. When she finally looked at me, her eyes were red-rimmed, pleading. "I'm sorry," they said. "I'm so sorry." But she got in the truck anyway. Robert didn't say goodbye to the children. He didn't say anything at all. He just started the engine, and they drove away, leaving tire marks in my gravel driveway and 5 children standing like abandoned packages on my porch. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Ethan started crying, that deep, gulping sob of a 4-year-old who doesn't understand why Mommy left. Grace wrapped her arms around him, only 8 years old herself, but already trying to mother everyone. Noah's sketchbook fell from his hands, papers scattering across the porch. Sophie just stared down the empty road, her sunny disposition crumbling like sand. "Are they coming back?" she whispered. I knelt down, gathering them close, breathing in the smell of their strawberry shampoo and playground dust. "Of course they are, sweetheart. Of course they are." It was the first lie I told them. It wouldn't be the last. That first day was chaos. 5 children, 1 bathroom, a refrigerator suddenly too small, a house that seemed to shrink with every hour. Liam tried to help, but he was just a boy himself. The little ones kept asking for their parents. Ethan wouldn't let go of my leg. By dinner time, I'd found cartoons I didn't know existed, cooked 3 different meals to satisfy various preferences, and answered the question, "When is Mommy coming home?" at least 40 times. When I finally got them all to bed, Ethan and Noah in the guest room, the girls squeezed into my old craft room on an air mattress, Liam on the couch, I sat at my kitchen table and cried, not gentle tears, but the kind that shake your whole body, that come from a place too deep for words. Desocupada, unoccupied, empty, useless. I looked around at the scattered toys, the dishes piled in the sink, the small shoes lined up by the door, and I thought, let me show you what occupied looks like. By the end of the first week, I'd learned that chaos has its own kind of rhythm. You just have to find the beat. 6 o'clock became our magic hour, the house erupting with the thunderous footsteps of 5 children who'd apparently forgotten that other people might still be sleeping. Ethan would appear at my bedside, his elephant tucked under one arm, asking in his small voice if it was really truly morning now, Grandma. And how could I say no to those eyes, so much like Emily's when she was young? Breakfast became a production. Liam liked his eggs scrambled dry. Sophie refused anything that looked weird, which apparently included most fruits. Noah would only eat if his food didn't touch on the plate. Grace wanted whatever Ethan was having because someone needed to show him how to be a big kid. And Ethan, well, Ethan mostly just wanted to sit in my lap while I tried to cook. which meant I learned to scramble eggs one-handed. "Tell us about the magic garden, Grandma," Sophie would say, syrup dripping down her chin, and I'd spin stories about the roses that only bloomed for brave hearts, the tomatoes that grew sweeter when you sang to them, the butterflies that carried wishes to the clouds. Somewhere in the second week, I stopped thinking of it as babysitting and started thinking of it as living. Liam, my serious boy, appointed himself my assistant. He'd wake up early to help with breakfast, his long limbs still awkward in that in-between stage where children are becoming something else. "Grandma, let me," he'd say, taking the heavy pot from my hands, and I'd see glimpses of the man he'd become. Steady, reliable, kind. Sophie discovered my garden with the wonder of an explorer finding new land. She'd spend hours examining each plant, asking questions I sometimes couldn't answer. "Why do roses have thorns, Grandma? Is it because they're sad?" And we'd talk about protection and beauty, about how the most precious things sometimes need defending. She started a journal, sketching flowers and writing their names in her careful, crooked handwriting. Noah, my quiet one, lived in his own world of lines and shadows. I found him one afternoon sitting on the back steps, drawing our house with such detail I could see the crack in the shutter, the bird's nest under the eaves. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," I told him. He looked up at me with those solemn eyes and said, "I'm drawing home so I don't forget." My heart cracked a little. Grace was 8 going on 30. She herded her younger siblings like a tiny shepherd, wiping Ethan's face, braiding Sophie's hair, reminding Noah to brush his teeth. "Someone has to help, Grandma," she'd say with such seriousness. I had to teach her, gently, carefully, that she was still allowed to be a child. And Ethan, my shadow, my little barnacle, wherever I went, he followed, kitchen. He dragged his step stool behind me. Garden, he'd dig holes next to mine. Bathroom, he'd wait outside the door. At night, he'd climb into my bed, his small body curling against mine, and whisper, "You're magic, Grandma. You make the sad go away." If only he knew how much sad I was swallowing myself. They started calling me Magic Grandma after I turned a power outage into a campfire storytelling night, transformed rain into an indoor treasure hunt, made vegetables disappear into sauce and reappear as magic pasta. Every disaster became an adventure because that's what you do. You make it work, you find the joy, you keep going. But at night, after stories and prayers and tucking in, I'd sit in the dark living room and stare at my phone. No calls, no messages, no explanation. 3 weeks, 4, 5. I'd call Emily's number and hear her voice on the voicemail. Bright, happy, before, "Hey, you've reached Emily, leave a message." I'd hang up without speaking. Because what do you say into that void? 6 weeks became 2 months. The initial chaos smoothed into routine. Homework at the kitchen table, soccer practice for Liam, dance class for the girls, library trips, Sunday church where everyone asked about Emily with those careful, pitying eyes. Just a temporary arrangement, I'd say, smiling until my face hurt. They'll be back soon. But I was starting to wonder if I was lying to them or to myself. 3 months, 91 days, 2,184 hours. I know because I counted each one. The calls became obsessive. I'd dial Emily's number during nap time, during my morning coffee, in the middle of folding laundry. Sometimes I'd call just to hear her voice on the voicemail, pressing the phone against my chest afterward like it might transfer some warmth, some connection, some proof that she still existed somewhere. Robert's phone went straight to a disconnected number, just a robotic voice saying, "The number you have reached is no longer in service." As if he'd simply erased himself from the world, I started reaching out to anyone who might know something. Robert's old co-worker from the dealership told me he'd been let go 6 months ago. News to me. Emily's friend Jessica said she hadn't heard from her since August. I called Emily's old boss at the insurance office. She'd quit without notice, they said. No forwarding information. It was like they'd vanished into thin air. "Mrs. Stevens, people don't just disappear," Officer Martinez said when I finally worked up the courage to file a missing persons report. He sat across from me at the police station, his kind eyes crinkling with concern. "Not in this day and age." "Then where are they?" My voice cracked. "It's been 3 months. My daughter wouldn't just abandon her children." Something's wrong. Something has to be wrong. He took notes, asked questions. When was the last time you saw them? Were there any signs of trouble? Any mention of where they were going? I answered everything, watching him write down my desperation in his neat police handwriting. 2 days later, he called, "We've located their last known whereabouts. Credit card records show they were in California, Los Angeles area, but the trail goes cold after that. Transactions stopped about 6 weeks ago." "What does that mean? Are they—" I couldn't say it, couldn't voice the fear that had been growing like a tumor in my chest. "It likely means they're using cash, maybe staying with friends. There's no evidence of foul play, Mrs. Stevens. I'm sorry, but unless there's proof of danger, there's not much we can do. They're adults who left their children with family." Left? Such a gentle word for abandonment. That night, I stood in the kitchen staring at my bank statement. My teacher's pension had seemed adequate when it was just me. Enough for the mortgage, utilities, my small pleasures. But now, 5 growing children, 5 mouths to feed, 5 bodies to clothe, 5 minds to educate. The numbers didn't add up. I started doing the math. Cheaper groceries, store brand everything. Lights off in empty rooms. Thermostat kept at uncomfortable temperatures. I canceled my cable, my book club subscription, the small charitable donations I'd always made. Every penny had to stretch, had to multiply, had to somehow feed the 5 miracles sleeping under my roof, but it still wasn't enough. Ethan needed new shoes. His toes were pressing against the front of his sneakers. Grace's winter coat from last year stopped at her elbows. The washing machine made an ominous grinding sound that promised expensive repairs, and the property tax bill arrived like a death sentence, demanding money I simply didn't have. I sat at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, surrounded by bills and calculators and the crushing weight of impossible mathematics. Outside, an owl hooted somewhere in the darkness. Inside, my house breathed with the soft sounds of sleeping children who trusted me to keep them safe. Fed, warm, desoccupada. Robert had called me useless. I looked at those bills again, then at the sleeping faces I could see through the bedroom door. Ethan with his thumb in his mouth, Grace with her arm protectively around Sophie, Noah clutching his sketchbook even in sleep. Liam on the couch, too big for it now, his feet hanging over the edge. "I won't let you down," I whispered into the darkness. "I don't care what I have to do," the owl hooted again. And somewhere in that sound, I heard an answer, not comfort exactly, but acknowledgement. The world was hard, life was hard, but love made you harder still. I gathered up the bills, turned off the lamp, and went to check on the children one more time. In the morning, I'd figure out how to make money appear from nowhere. I'd perform whatever magic was necessary, because that's what Magic Grandma did. The first pie I sold was an accident. Martha Henderson from church stopped by to drop off some hand-me-down clothes for the children. The scent of apple cinnamon wafted from my kitchen, and she inhaled deeply, eyes closing. "Lord, have mercy, Margaret. That smells like heaven itself." "Just something for the kids' lunches this week," I said, trying to usher her out before she saw the stack of past-due notices on my counter. I would pay good money for a pie like that. Jim's birthday is next week, and store-bought just doesn't cut it. She paused, studying my face. $20, $20, a bag of groceries, a tank of gas, a small miracle. 30, I heard myself say. And I'll do his favorite. Bourbon pecan. Word spread through our small town, like fire through dry grass. Margaret Stevens was taking orders. By the end of the week, I had 5 pie commissions. By the end of the month, I was baking every evening after the children went to bed. My kitchen transformed into a small bakery, flour dusting every surface like snow. But pies alone wouldn't cut it. I dragged out my old sewing machine from the hall closet, the one I'd gotten as a wedding present 40 years ago. Mrs. Chen down the street needed curtains hemmed. The Kowalski twins needed Halloween costumes. Suddenly I was a seamstress again, remembering skills my own mother had taught me. Stitching by lamplight while the house creaked and settled around me. "Grandma, you're always working," Liam observed one night, finding me hunched over the machine at 11 p.m. "Magic doesn't make itself, sweetheart," I told him, though my back ached and my eyes burned. "Go back to bed." But the real money came from an unexpected source. My neighbor, Tom Richardson, a widower who lived 3 houses down, mentioned that his daughter was struggling with algebra. "You taught middle school, didn't you, Margaret? Don't suppose you'd be willing to tutor?" I showed up at their house the next evening with workbooks and patience, teaching a frustrated 13-year-old that math wasn't the enemy. By the 3rd session, something clicked. She solved a problem on her own, looked up with this amazed expression and said, "I get it. I actually get it." That feeling, that spark of understanding lighting up a child's face, I'd missed it more than I'd realized. Soon I had 3 students, then 5, then 7, parents paying me $20 an hour to do what I'd spent my entire career doing. And slowly, painfully, the math started working. Not comfortably, not easily, but working. The children never knew how close we came to the edge. They didn't know about the nights I cried over bills, or the times I ate less so they could eat more, or how I'd started rationing my blood pressure medication to make it last longer. They just knew that Grandma always had dinner ready, always had clean clothes in their drawers, always had a smile, even when her eyes were tired. Sophie's garden flourished. We planted vegetables now. Practical magic, I called it. She'd harvest tomatoes and green beans with such pride, carrying them inside like trophies. "Look, Grandma, we grew these. We're farmers. We're survivors," I thought. But I said, "We're blessed, baby girl. We're blessed." The community helped in ways both seen and unseen. Someone left a bag of children's clothes on my porch, no name attached. The church accidentally gave us twice the usual food pantry allotment. Tom Richardson started showing up to fix things, the washing machine, the leaky faucet, the broken step, refusing payment, just saying, "Neighbors help neighbors, Margaret," and maybe I imagined it. But his visits got longer. He'd stay for coffee, tell stories that made the children laugh, look at me with something warm in his eyes. It had been 12 years since I'd lost my husband. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen by someone, really seen, not as Grandma or Mrs. Stevens or that poor woman with her daughter's abandoned kids, but as Margaret, just Margaret one evening. As November turned the trees to flame, we all sat on the back porch watching the sunset, Ethan in my lap, the others sprawled on the steps, the smell of Sophie's chamomile tea drifting from the kitchen. "Grandma," Grace asked, her voice small, "are we going to be okay?" I looked at their faces, my 5 reasons for getting up each morning, my 5 heartbeats walking around outside my body. "We already are, sweetheart," I said. And for the first time in months, I believed it. It was Sophie who found me crying in the bathroom. I thought I was being quiet, had waited until everyone was asleep, had run the water to mask the sound. But 8-year-olds have a 6th sense for sadness, and suddenly there she was, standing in the doorway in her unicorn pajamas, her blonde hair tangled from sleep. "Grandma, are you sick?" I wiped my eyes quickly, forcing a smile. "Just tired, sweetheart, go back to bed." But she climbed into my lap, this child who was getting so big, who wouldn't fit there much longer, and pressed her face against my chest. And then she said the words I'd been dreading for 6 months. "They're not coming back, are they?" My heart shattered, completely, utterly shattered. "Of course they are," I whispered, but the lie tasted bitter. "Your mama loves you so much, Sophie. Both your parents do. Then why did they leave?" Her voice was so small, so broken. Did we do something wrong? Was I too loud? Did Noah draw on the walls too many times? Is it because Ethan still wets the bed sometimes? "No, baby, no, no, no." I held her tighter. "You are perfect. All of you. This isn't about you." "Then what is it about?" I had no answer. How do you explain to a child that sometimes adults make terrible choices, that sometimes people run from their problems instead of facing them, that sometimes love isn't enough to make people stay? The next morning I found Sophie in the garden digging a hole with her hands, tears making tracks down her dirty face. When I asked what she was doing, she said, "Burying my happy because Mommy took it when she left." That's when I knew we needed to do something. We couldn't just wait in this limbo letting the silence eat us alive. "We're going to write letters," I announced at breakfast. "Every Sunday, we're going to write to your mama and daddy. We'll tell them about our week, about what we're learning, about how much we miss them. But we don't know where to send them," Liam pointed out. Always the practical one. Then we'll keep them safe until we do, I said. The important thing is that we tell them, that we don't forget how to talk to them. That first Sunday, we spread out at the kitchen table with crayons, markers, and construction paper. Ethan drew hearts, wobbly, enormous hearts that took up entire pages. Grace wrote in her careful cursive, "Dear Mommy, I am taking care of everyone like you asked, but I miss you. Love, Grace." Noah sketched pictures of our house, of the garden, of all of us together. Sophie filled pages with questions. "Where are you? When are you coming home? Did you forget us?" And Liam, my oldest, wrote, "Mom, Dad, Grandma is tired all the time, but she pretends she's not. She needs help. We all need you. Please come home." I added my own letter, choosing my words carefully. "Emily, sweetheart, the children are well. We're managing, but we miss you desperately. Whatever you're facing, we can face it together. Please, just let us know you're okay. All my love, Mom." We sealed them in envelopes, wrote Mom and Dad on the outside, and placed them in a special box I kept on the mantel. Every Sunday the ritual repeated: write, seal, store, hope, wait, wonder. The letters piled up. 1, 5, 10, 20. We never got a single response. Months passed. Christmas came and went. I'd sold 30 pies to make sure there were presents under our scraggly tree. New Year's arrived, and I made wishes with each child. World peace, Grace, new art supplies, Noah, a puppy, Ethan, for Mom and Dad to come home, Sophie, and from Liam, quietly, for Grandma to not be so sad anymore. Tom Richardson started joining us for Sunday dinners. He'd show up with ice cream or flowers from his own garden, would help Liam with his homework, would tell terrible jokes that made the children groan but laugh anyway. And sometimes, when our hands would brush reaching for the same dish, I'd feel something I thought I'd buried with my husband. Possibility. "You're allowed to be happy too," he said one evening as we washed dishes while the children played outside. "I am happy, Margaret?" He turned to face me, his weathered hands still sudsy. "You're allowed to live your own life, even now, even with everything. But was I? Was I allowed to find joy when my daughter was lost somewhere? Was I allowed to feel Tom's kindness warming something cold inside me when 5 children were sleeping each night waiting for parents who might never return? One night, 9 months after they'd left, Sophie climbed into my bed and whispered, "Grandma, can I tell you a secret?" "Always, sweetheart. I'm starting to forget what Mommy's voice sounds like." She started crying. "I try to remember, but it gets quieter and quieter in my head, and I'm scared it'll disappear completely." I held her while she sobbed, and I cried too, because she was forgetting, and I was remembering too much, and somewhere in California or anywhere else, Emily was missing this, missing everything. And for what? The next Sunday, Sophie's letter was different instead of questions. She wrote, "Dear Mommy, Grandma says you still love us. I'm trying to believe her, but it's hard. I'm getting bigger and you're missing it. Please don't miss too much love, Sophie." I added that letter to the box with all the others. 43 envelopes filled with love, longing, and the slow, painful process of moving forward when you're not sure if you should. Spring arrived like a promise, the dogwoods blooming white against blue sky, Sophie's garden erupting with new life, the air sweet with the smell of rebirth. It had been exactly 1 year, 2 weeks, and 3 days since they left, but who was counting? That morning started ordinary. I was making pancakes. Liam liked chocolate chips. Sophie wanted blueberries. Noah preferred plain, but with extra butter. Ethan was sitting on the counter, helping by eating half the batter. Grace was setting the table because Grace always set the table. My little homemaker who still thought she had to earn her place in the world. Then I heard it. A car engine. The crunch of gravel in the driveway. My heart stopped. Just completely stopped beating. Through the kitchen window, I watched a dusty sedan pull up. Not Robert's truck. Something smaller, older, unfamiliar. The driver's door opened, and Emily stepped out. The spatula fell from my hand. Clattering against the stove, she looked like a ghost of herself. Her hair, once always perfectly styled, hung limp and dull. She'd lost weight, her clothes hanging on her frame. But it was her eyes that destroyed me. Hollow, haunted, carrying burdens I couldn't begin to imagine. Robert emerged from the passenger side, and I barely recognized him. The arrogant set of his shoulders was gone, replaced by something broken. His expensive watch was missing. His designer polo had been replaced with a faded t-shirt. He looked like a man who'd been to war and lost. "Kids," I whispered, my voice barely working. "Your parents are here." The chaos that followed was indescribable. Ethan shrieked, "Mommy!" and launched himself off the counter. Sophie froze, her face crumpling as 5-year-old confusion crashed into 8-year-old anger. Noah dropped his sketchbook, pages scattering. Grace stood perfectly still, tears streaming down her face, not moving toward or away, and Liam, my steady, responsible Liam, looked at me with something like betrayal in his eyes, as if I'd somehow known they were coming and hadn't warned him. The children poured out the front door like a flood. Emily collapsed to her knees on the driveway, and they crashed into her, a tangle of limbs and tears and desperate holding. She sobbed into their hair, saying, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," over and over like a prayer or a curse. Robert stood apart, watching. When his eyes found mine across the yard, he looked away first. Shame, I realized. He was drowning in it. I don't remember walking outside. I don't remember my feet moving or the door opening. I just suddenly found myself standing there, watching my daughter piece herself back together through the bodies of her children, watching my grandchildren trying to hold on to something they'd been slowly letting go of for 12 months. "Mama," Emily gasped, looking up at me with red, swollen eyes. "Mama, But words failed her. They failed all of us. Eventually, we moved inside. The children wouldn't let go of Emily, clinging to her like she might evaporate. She sat on my couch, the same couch where Liam had slept for a year, with all 5 of them pressed against her, and she just held them and cried. Robert stood near the door, hands shoved in his pockets, looking at everything except me. The silence stretched, punctuated only by sniffles and the sound of Ethan's thumb sucking, a habit he'd mostly broken but which had returned in his stress. Finally, I made coffee, because what else do you do when your world tilts sideways? You make coffee, you create normalcy from chaos. You do the next thing, and then the next thing, and somehow you survive. "We should talk," Robert said quietly, not demanding, not commanding, asking. The children were absorbed with Emily, showing her Sophie's garden, Noah's drawings, Grace's report cards, everything they'd saved up to show her. Liam hovered nearby, protective as if he might need to shield them from another abandonment. Robert and I stepped into the kitchen. He looked at the calendar on the wall, covered in soccer practices, tutoring appointments, doctor visits, dance recitals. A year of life he'd missed, documented in my looping handwriting. "Margaret," he started, his voice rough. "We failed. We failed everyone, but especially those kids and especially you." I crossed my arms, waiting. I'd earned the right to hear this. I lost my job before we came here that day. Lost it and didn't tell anyone. The bills piled up. We were going to lose the house, I thought. God, I thought I could fix it. Thought if we went to California, started fresh, I'd find something better. I was so sure. He laughed bitterly. Instead, we lost everything. Lived in our car for a month. Emily waitressed. I did day labor. Nothing worked. Nothing stuck. "You could have called," I said, my voice like ice. "You could have asked for help." I was too proud. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and too ashamed. How do I admit that the man who called you useless couldn't even feed his own family? The silence in my kitchen felt alive, breathing with all the unsaid words of the past year. Robert stood by the window, his back to me, shoulders hunched like he was bracing for a blow. Outside, I could hear the children's voices, Sophie showing Emily her sunflowers, Ethan's endless, "Mommy, look, Mommy, watch." We kept thinking next week, Robert continued, his voice cracking. Next week we'd have enough money saved. Next week we'd have found steady work. Next week we'd be ready to face you, to face them, to admit what we'd done. He turned, and I saw tears on his face. This man who'd called me useless, who'd looked at my life with contempt, But next week never came. And suddenly it had been months. And how do you come back from that? How do you walk through that door? You just do, I said. You just walk through it. You're their parents. Emily appeared in the doorway, Ethan attached to her hip like he'd been when he was 2. She looked at Robert, then at me, and her face crumpled. Mama, I don't have the words. There aren't words big enough for how sorry I am. Sorry doesn't give me back the nights I cried myself to sleep, I said, and I was surprised by the strength in my voice. Sorry doesn't pay the bills I couldn't afford. Sorry doesn't explain to Sophie why her mother forgot her. I didn't forget. Didn't you? I gestured toward the living room where the box of letters sat on the mantel. 52 letters, one for every week. They wrote to you every single Sunday, drew pictures, poured their hearts onto paper, and you know how many responses they got? 0. Emily's face went white. What letters? I retrieved the box, set it on the kitchen table. 52 envelopes, each one addressed in crayon or marker or careful pencil. Dear Mommy and Daddy, written over and over in 5 different hands, getting more sophisticated as the months passed, as they grew up without their parents there to see it. She opened one, Noah's, from month 3, a drawing of their family, but the parents were just outlines, empty spaces where faces should be, in his careful printing. I'm forgetting what you look like. Grandma showed me pictures, but it's not the same. Emily's hands shook. Robert picked up another, read Sophie's question. Did I do something wrong? His face crumpled. They thought it was their fault, I said, and anger, righteous, protective anger, filled my chest. 5 children blamed themselves for your choices. 5 babies went to sleep every night wondering what they'd done to make you leave. Margaret, please. Robert started. No. My voice came out harder than I intended. You called me unoccupied. You said I had no real concerns, no responsibilities. Do you want to know what I've been occupied with? Ethan's nightmares, Sophie's depression, Grace trying to mother everyone because she thought if she was good enough, you'd come back. Noah going silent for weeks at a time. Liam growing up too fast because someone had to be the man of the house. I was shaking now. 12 months of swallowed pain pouring out. I've been occupied with selling pies at midnight because the electric bill was due. Rationing my medication because I couldn't afford both pills and groceries. Teaching myself to be mother and father and everything in between because you 2 decided your shame was more important than your children. Emily was sobbing now. Deep, gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Ethan, sensing her distress, started crying too, though he didn't understand why. The other children appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of raised voices, their faces anxious and just like that. My anger deflated, because those faces, those precious, worried faces, they'd heard enough fighting. They'd lived through enough pain. But, I said quietly, they never stopped loving you. Not once. Not even when they started forgetting your voices. Not even when they cried themselves to sleep. They kept writing those letters because they never gave up hope. I looked at Robert, then at Emily. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay here for a while. You're going to rebuild trust with these children, one day at a time. You're going to prove through actions, not words, that you're back for good. And you're going to do whatever it takes to make this right. We don't deserve, Emily started. No, I agreed. You don't. But they deserve parents who fight for them, so that's what you're going to become. That first week was awkward, painful, full of halting conversations and uncertain touches. Robert slept on the couch. His old spot now belonged to him for different reasons. Emily shared the girls' room, all 3 of them pressed into the double bed, like they were afraid she'd disappear in the night. Robert started working odd jobs around the neighborhood. Tom Richardson, bless him, hired him for construction work. I suspected at wages higher than the job warranted. Emily helped with cooking, cleaning, the endless laundry that comes with 5 children. But mostly, they just tried to be present, to show up, to slowly knit themselves back into the fabric of their children's lives. One afternoon, I found Robert in Sophie's garden, kneeling in the dirt beside her. She was showing him her tomatoes, explaining in her serious 8-year-old way about watering schedules and companion planting, things I'd taught her. Your grandma's pretty smart, huh? He said. Sophie looked at him with those wise eyes. Grandma's magic. She saved us when you left. Robert's hands stilled in the soil. Yeah, he said quietly. She did. Later that evening, as I tended my roses, he appeared beside me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, Margaret, his voice was rough. I was wrong about everything. You're not unoccupied. You're not useless. He paused, searching for words. You're the strongest person I've ever met. You built something I, with all my pride and plans, never could. You built a family that holds together even when it's breaking. You taught these kids that they're worth staying for. He turned to face me fully. I don't know if you can forgive me. I don't know if I'd forgive me. But I want you to know. I see you now. I see everything you are. Everything you've done. And I'm sorry I was too blind before. The apology I'd imagined demanding for 12 months suddenly seemed less important than the man standing before me. Broken, humbled, but genuinely trying to rebuild. You hurt my daughter, I said. You hurt those children, you hurt me. I know. But they love you anyway, so I'm going to learn how. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a start. Healing, I learned, doesn't arrive in grand gestures. It comes in the small, unglamorous moments. In the morning, coffee made without being asked. In the homework checked. In the bedtime stories read with voices still rusty from disuse. 3 weeks after their return, I found Emily sitting on the back porch at dawn, wrapped in my old quilt, watching the sunrise paint the Texas sky in shades of amber and rose. I sat beside her with 2 cups of coffee, saying nothing. Sometimes silence is the only language that makes sense. I used to watch you, she said finally, when I was little, the way you'd fix everything. Scraped knees, broken toys, broken hearts. I thought you had some kind of superpower, she laughed, but it was wet with tears. Then I grew up and had my own children, and I realized being a mother is just showing up every day, even when you're tired. Even when you're scared, even when you have no idea what you're doing, you just show up. And you didn't, I said gently. I didn't. She turned to look at me, her eyes red-rimmed. For a whole year, I failed at the one job that actually mattered, and Mama, the worst part. There were days I was relieved, days I didn't have to hear them fighting or clean up after them, or manage 5 different schedules. Days I could just be Emily, not Mom. How sick is that? I thought about my own moments of exhaustion this past year, the times I'd locked myself in the bathroom just to breathe, the nights I'd fantasized about running away myself. That's not sick, I said. That's human. Being a parent is the hardest thing in the world. But Emily, everyone feels that way sometimes. The difference is, you act on it or you don't. I acted on it. Yes, and now you're here. So the question is, what are you going to do now? She looked towards the window, where we could see Ethan's small form curled up on the couch, thumb in his mouth. I'm going to show up. Every single day, even when I fail, even when they hate me, and Sophie does hate me a little, I can see it. She doesn't hate you. She's protecting herself from being hurt again. So how do I fix that? You don't fix it. You just love her anyway, consistently until she believes it again. Robert was changing too. Tom had him working on a renovation project 3 streets over, a full gut job on an old Victorian. I'd stop by sometimes with lunch, watching Robert swing a hammer with the kind of focus he'd never brought to his dealership job. His hands were blistered, his back ached, but there was something different in his eyes. Purpose, maybe, or just the simple dignity of honest work. Tom says I have a knack for this, he told me one afternoon, wiping sweat from his forehead. Might see if I can get my contractor's license, probably start at the bottom, working for someone else, but he shrugged. Bottom's honest, at least. Bottom's where you build foundations, I said. Liam was the hardest to reach. My oldest grandson, who'd been my helper, my right hand, my little man. He was angry, not loud angry, but the quiet, simmering kind that burns deeper. He'd answer his father's questions in monosyllables, would leave rooms when his mother entered, would look at me sometimes like I'd betrayed him by letting them stay. One night, I found him on the front porch, staring at the stars. Want company? I asked. He shrugged, to which I took as permission. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the crickets, the distant bark of a dog, the rustle of wind through my roses. I was the man of the house, he said finally. For a whole year, I was the one who helped you. I was the one who made sure everyone was okay. And now he's back. And he just takes over like he has the right, like he didn't abandon us. "You're 12 years old, Liam. You should never have had to be the man of the house." "But I was good at it." His voice cracked. "I took care of everyone. I helped you, and now I'm just a kid again, and I don't know how to be just a kid." My heart broke for this boy who'd grown up too fast, who'd had his childhood stolen not by one absence, but by two, his parents leaving, and his own forced maturity. "Liam, look at me." I waited until his eyes met mine. "What you did this year was extraordinary. You were brave and strong and everything I needed, but that was never your job. It was mine, and now it's time to give that burden back to the adults and just be 12. What if they leave again?" There it was. The fear underneath the anger, the wound beneath the scar. "They might," I said, because I wouldn't lie to him. "People fail sometimes, but you know what? Even if they do, you'll be okay, because you're not alone anymore. You've got me, and you've got Tom, and you've got this whole community. You're not carrying this by yourself." He leaned against me, and I felt him shake with silent tears. My strong boy, finally letting himself be young again. The breakthrough with Sophie came in the garden. Emily had been trying for weeks, helping with weeding, asking about plants, offering compliments. Sophie would respond with one-word answers, her little body radiating rejection. Then one morning, Emily came outside to find Sophie crying over a broken sunflower, snapped by wind in the night, its golden head drooping sadly. "Oh, sweetheart," Emily said, kneeling beside her. "I grew it from a seed," Sophie sobbed. "I took care of it every day, and now it's dead, and I couldn't stop it, and—" She looked at her mother with devastation in her eyes. "Everything I love goes away." Emily pulled her close, and for once, Sophie didn't resist. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, baby. I went away, and that wasn't fair, and you had every right to be angry with me." "I am angry," Sophie wailed, "but I also missed you so much, and I don't know which one to feel." "You can feel both," Emily said. "Love and anger can live in the same heart. And Sophie, I'm going to prove to you every single day that I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to believe me yet. Just watch. I'll show you." That evening, they planted a new sunflower together. Sophie and Mommy's flower, they decided. And every morning after, they'd water it together. Sophie slowly, cautiously letting her mother back in. 2 months after their return, Robert and Emily found a small rental house 6 blocks away. Nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom place with cracked linoleum and outdated appliances. But it was theirs, paid for with Robert's honest wages. The children would split time, weekdays with their parents, weekends with me. "So you can rest," Emily insisted. But we both knew it was really so the kids could maintain the stability they'd found. The night before they moved, we all sat on my porch, 11 people crammed onto a space meant for 4. Ethan had fallen asleep in Emily's lap. Grace was braiding Sophie's hair. Noah was sketching the moment, trying to capture it before it disappeared. Liam sat between Robert and me, not quite touching his father, but not pulling away either. Tom had joined us too, his hand finding mine in the darkness, and I let it stay. "Thank you," Robert said quietly, looking at me across the heads of our family, "for everything, for showing us what love actually looks like, and for the first time in 13 months. I felt something like peace. 6 months after Emily and Robert moved into their rental, life had settled into a new rhythm. Not perfect. There were still hard days, still moments of doubt, still old wounds that ached in the quiet hours. But we were healing slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. Then the letter arrived. It came on a Tuesday, printed on official letterhead from KTEX News, our local station. "Dear Mrs. Stevens," it began, "we've heard about your story from members of your community, and we'd like to feature you in our Everyday Heroes segment." My first instinct was to throw it away. I wasn't a hero. I was just a grandmother who'd done what needed doing, what any decent person would do. But Tom, reading over my shoulder, had other ideas. "Margaret, people need to hear this," he said gently. "Not because you need the attention, but because somewhere out there's another grandmother wondering if she can make it, another family falling apart. Your story could help them, or it could embarrass Emily and Robert. We'll ask them first." That evening, gathered around my kitchen table, this table that had hosted so many meals, so many homework sessions, so many late-night conversations, We discussed it as a family. "I think you should do it, Grandma," Liam said. "You're not just our hero. You could be someone else's too." Emily reached across the table for my hand. "Mama, I'm not ashamed anymore. We made mistakes. Huge, terrible mistakes. But we're fixing them. If telling that story helps someone else avoid our pain, or gives hope to someone in the middle of it, maybe some good can come from what we put you through." Robert nodded. "You took our worst moment and showed us what love looks like. That deserves to be shared." So I called the number on the letter. 2 weeks later, a reporter named Sarah Martinez showed up with a camera crew. She was young, maybe 30, with kind eyes and a gentle manner that put the children at ease. We sat in my living room, the same room where I'd comforted crying children, folded endless laundry, survived a year of impossible days, and I told our story, not the sanitized version, the real one. I talked about Robert's cruel words, about the abandonment, about nights I'd cried over bills I couldn't pay. I talked about selling pies and sewing clothes and rationing medication, about letters written to parents who never responded, about 5 children who blamed themselves for their parents' choices. But I also talked about redemption, about Robert and Emily's return, broken but willing to rebuild, about forgiveness that came slowly, painfully, but came nonetheless, about a family that fell apart and found a way to come back together. The children shared too. Sophie talked about her garden, how plants taught her that broken things can grow again. Noah showed his drawings, a visual timeline of our year, from dark, empty spaces to colorful, full scenes. Grace, my little nurturer, explained how she'd learned that taking care of others starts with taking care of yourself. Ethan, now 6, simply crawled into my lap and declared, "My grandma is magic." And Liam, my serious boy, looked directly into the camera and said, "Grandma taught us that family isn't about being perfect. It's about not giving up on each other, even when it's really, really hard." Emily and Robert appeared on camera too, which took courage I deeply respected. They owned their failures, talked about the shame spiral that had kept them away, about the hard work of earning back trust. Robert talked about learning that being a man wasn't about pride or money, but about showing up and doing the work, even when it's unglamorous. "Margaret showed me what strength really looks like," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be half the person she is." The segment aired on a Friday evening. By Saturday morning, my phone was ringing off the hook. Messages flooded in. From across Texas, then across the country, grandmothers raising grandchildren, thanking me for making them feel seen. Parents who'd walked away and were inspired to come back. Families in crisis who found hope in our story. One letter from a woman in Ohio read, "I'm 67 and raising my 4 grandchildren. Some days I want to give up. Your story reminded me why I can't. Thank you for showing me I'm not alone." Another from a father in California. "I left my family 2 years ago. Watching your segment broke something open in me. I called my kids today for the first time in months. Thank you for showing me it's not too late." The story went viral, shared across social media, featured on national morning shows, turned into articles and blog posts. Suddenly, our small Texas town was flooded with interview requests, speaking invitations, people wanting to hear more. But the most meaningful response came from Sophie. She'd started a YouTube channel, Sophie's Garden of Hope, where she talked about growing things, both plants and people. Her first video, filmed in our backyard, ended with, "My grandma says broken things can bloom again. I used to not believe her, but now I'm the proof." A year after the segment aired, I received an invitation to speak at a grandparents' rights conference in Austin. Tom drove me. Tom, who'd proposed 3 months earlier with a simple band and the words, "I'd like to spend whatever time we have left being officially yours, if you'll have me." I stood before 200 people, grandparents, social workers, advocates, and I told them the truth. It's not the big dramatic moments that matter. It's the showing up, the meals made when you're exhausted, the homework checked, the tears wiped, the consistent, unglamorous, everyday choice to love someone, even when they make it hard. Robert called me unoccupied, I continued, and maybe by the world's standards, I was. No job title, no salary, no resume to brag about. But I've learned that the most important occupation has no paycheck. It's the work of loving people back to wholeness, of holding families together when they're falling apart, of being the steady presence in an unsteady world. You're not just babysitting. You're not just filling in. You're saving lives. Don't let anyone tell you that's not valuable work. Don't let anyone tell you you're not essential. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. But what mattered more were the conversations afterward. Grandparents sharing their struggles, their victories, their exhaustion and triumph. We were a community of the overlooked, finally seeing each other. That night back home, I sat on my porch with Tom, watching the sun set over Sophie's garden, now expanded, beautiful, a living testimony to growth after destruction. Inside, I could hear laughter. Emily and Robert had brought the kids for Sunday dinner, now a sacred tradition. Regrets? Tom asked, squeezing my hand. I thought about the past 2 years, the pain, the struggle, the nights I'd wondered if I could make it. I thought about bills paid with pie money, about clothes sewn by lamplight, about 5 children who taught me that love multiplies rather than divides. Not a single one, I said, because I'd learned the truth. Being called unoccupied was the greatest gift Robert ever gave me. It forced me to prove, to him, to the world, to myself, what my occupation really was. I was occupied with loving, and in the end, that was the only work that ever truly mattered 3 years later. Sophie stood in my garden, now our garden, officially registered as a non-profit teaching space for local children, giving a tour to a news crew doing a follow-up story. At 15, she'd grown tall and confident, her voice steady as she explained companion planting to the reporter. Behind her, the house bustled with life, Ethan practicing piano, a gift from Tom, Noah's artwork covering the walls, Grace helping Emily prepare dinner, Liam, now taller than his father, working with Robert on building raised garden beds, and me, I sat on the porch with Tom, watching it all, knowing that the greatest gardens aren't made of flowers, they're made of people who learn to bloom again